All right, Calvin Castine, I should be slightly off camera because the focus today is on this gentleman right here and the topics he wants to talk about. And as usual, when we talk to someone, we like to find out a little bit about them. This is Steve Bowman, and what's your exact title here at the Clinton County, Steve?
I am the director of the Clinton County Veteran Service Agency.
All right, and I know you replaced Warren Manor, who
Yep, back
had
in
it for
2004.
he had it for a number of years. Do you have any other history before Warren of names you might have encountered?
I think before Warren was Wayne Evans, was a director here. There was a Wyman that was director here for a period of time, somewhere in that mix as well. In fact, Gerald Mayo from Champlain was originally appointed for director here, but only served a very short period of time.
Yeah, he got in and he just decided he
It
didn't
wasn't
want to do
what
it.
he wanted to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Prior to that, I have a list of people, but it's
You haven't
somewhere.
you haven't got it memorized.
Yeah, I don't have it memorized.
Yeah, see, if you listen close, you can hear that Iowa accent here on this fella.
Yeah.
He's not
Yeah.
a native. He's not a native to the North
Yeah, I'm
Country.
not a native to the North Country, but I've lived here longer than I did in Iowa. I grew up in Iowa, was a farm boy, and when I graduated high school at the age of 17, I went straight into the military, went into the Air Force, and the Air Force brought me here.
To Plattsburgh Air Force. We used to have an Air Force base here, right?
Yes,
Plattsburgh, you know.
and I was stationed here, came here in 1977, and met my wife Gail, and this has become home. And I served here for 6 years, and then started doing tours overseas. Spent time in Okinawa, some time in Florida, time back in the Pacific Theater in Korea. And my last duty station was at the Pentagon, and that's where I retired, and we moved back here. And this is home.
All right.
You know.
Now, I got to ask, whenever an airman comes in from that period and marries a local girl, was this a match made at Brody's?
It was actually a match made at the Office Bar and Grill.
Okay.
So, yeah, we had met, and I told one of the guys that I was sitting with that night that when Gail walked in the door, I said, I'm going to marry her. And he says, I can't even get her to dance. But 3 months later, we got married, and we're coming up on 42 years. So.
All right. This girl had a last name before she became a Bowman?
She was Perry. She Bernard Perry's daughter.
Out of Shazy.
Out of Shazy.
Yeah, and she runs a little restaurant in Rouse's Point.
Yep. We had she had worked in the club systems on base, in the food service business, in many of the different bases that we were stationed, and she kind of fell in love with that. She's always loved to meet people and kind of please people with her food, and she had made the statement, I think we were in Florida at the time, that she would love to own a diner at some point in time. And I'd promised her when that opportunity rose that we would do it. So when we retired, she was working for Wyeth, and when the Pfizer takeover started to occur, she had her 10 years time in, so she was invested. And she left Wyeth, and we started actively looking for a diner. And the Central Grill up in Rouse's Point was an operating restaurant run by Gary and Angel Babby, and we bought it from them.
And now it's known as?
And now it's known as Best Friends Family Diner.
Right there, if you're heading for Vermont.
Yep, can't miss it.
Can't miss it. Right across the border
Yep.
from Canada, it's sitting there. If you head toward Vermont or coming from Vermont, it's right there in that corner of Lake Street, and so it's a easy to locate establishment.
Yep.
And I got to ask, since you're from Iowa, Did you grow up drinking soda or pop?
Pop.
Pop. I went to Omaha.
Yeah.
I used to work for Woodman of the World, and I went to Omaha and ordered a soda, and they said, "You must be from New York."
Exactly.
We drink pop here.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. That's so true. You know, it's just some of those the different way things are described. You know, and throughout the country.
Do you still call it pop, or you have
I call it soda.
you call it soda? Okay,
Yeah.
we've
Yeah, I'm at least New York developed at least a little bit. So
we've converted you.
yeah,
Okay, so your military service again was what? When to when?
Air Force from 1976 to 1994.
Okay.
I took an early retirement during the drawdown after Desert Storm. So I've been retired now since '94. I draw
25 years.
a retirement check from the VA.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I used to work for the village of Champlain for a period of time.
That's when I first met you.
Yep. And now I'm here.
There you are.
And I'm home.
Yeah. Now I know in researching this job a little bit, you've got to be a veteran during wartime, and I know '76 was too late for Vietnam by a year. What war
War era was Desert Storm.
does it storm?
I didn't serve in Desert Storm, but I was in the military during that period of time. So I helped take care of the unit and the family members with the unit that I was assigned to down in Florida. So that may have led me to a little bit of this, you know, in the long run. So.
Right. And we've kind of, I think are we still considered at war? I would hope that
Yes.
this is considered war era.
Yes.
I mean, not that I'm hoping for it's a war era,
Yeah.
but from what's happening with our military, I would hope they'd get credit for being in a war era.
It's since Desert Storm, it has been considered that we've been in a
Consistent.
wartime status since that time frame. So everybody that serves since that period of time would be considered wartime veterans.
Now, I do know you here a couple of days ago to congratulate you. People tuning in here must say, "Oh, I recognize him. He was at the State of the Union address." I'm sure
Yes.
most of the people watching this spotted you right away. So that's the guy from the State of the Union address.
Hmm.
Is that a bit of an honor to be invited by our congresswoman to?
Very much so. You know, it's over the years I've watched the State of the Union addresses and watched how the president introduces the guests of the presidential family, and always just kind of watched and kind of wondered, you know,
What's that
and looked
like?
at the crowd and all that kind of stuff. And when I got the call from Congresswoman Stefanik's staff, Joel Wood, who works here locally in her office, saying that the Congresswoman would like to invite me, I was a little bit shocked that she would select me. We've done a lot of work together on veterans issues. We've had some joint meetings with VA dealing with VA healthcare and a few other issues, but I didn't think I was that high on her list. But now I see where she holds me in high regard. So we've done a lot of work together over the years since she's been in office, and I really am appreciative of her and her staff because they've been able to open some of the doors in the VA that, following the normal process, would have taken us years to get or gain that benefit for that veteran when it only took months through a congressional inquiry. So I think sometimes knowing the limitations and having that capability available can be very, very helpful.
And you know, she I think she has proven herself to be a friend of the veterans. she's at so many of the North Country honor flights, and
Mhm.
if she's not able to be there in Plattsburgh for the send-off, many times she's there in Washington to greet them. I can think of one of the honor flight attendees who was not from Clinton County, but Levi Oakes, the code
Mhm.
talker from the Mohawk Nation over there, and Hogansburg, and she was there and presented, I forget, over 20. He was the only living one, but the family members were there for these code talkers. And then so when we were talking to her after that, we said, this we should make sure this guy. She says it's already in plan that he will be on an
Yeah.
honor flight, and within
Yeah.
a few months he was on his way to Washington D.C.
Mhm.
But she doesn't just talk the talk. She walks it. She
Yeah,
does
she
it.
does.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed with her and her ability. And even when I was down in Washington D.C. for the State of the Union, talking with her and a few of the other congressmen and some of the other representatives from around the state or around the country, um, she was seemed like she was well regarded by her counterparts. Um, and I had an opportunity when I was with Congresswoman Stefanik to meet Congressman Tonko from Syracuse. And we were able to sit and talk for a period of time. And we talked about VA healthcare and some of the problems that we see with that. And I was very pleased with the reception that I got from them. And the concerns that they had that the VA isn't meeting all the needs of the veterans. And I think with that big institution, it's just problems. It's not nimble enough to be able to meet those needs. So I think there's some future work that we can do together to try to improve the care that the VA provides.
You know, it's just mind-boggling sometimes. But I guess anytime you get into government agencies, you run into these problems. But as long as the VA has been around, you'd think it would be running perfectly right now. It'd be
Mhm.
fine-tuned, and all these things
Mhm.
would be. But it's not the case. It's unfortunate, but it's
It,
not the case.
it's true, and a lot of it deals with people and laws. Um, Many of the laws that govern the VA are somewhat restrictive, and the funding requirements for the VA is somewhat restrictive. And not until just recently, within the last couple of years, the VA had to work on their funding each year for the next year, and had no type of continuing resolution to be able to expect a certain amount of funding moving forward. But the laws have changed, and now they have like a 2-year plan. So when they get funding for this fiscal year, they already know what is going to be planned for the following fiscal year. So they can work with that in mind. That allows for increasing staff, increasing enrollments, and improving the access capabilities that they need to be able to care for the veterans. Because what we see, we're in a transition period in VA healthcare right now. For the last 30 years, we've been caring primarily for the World War II veterans and the Korean War veterans. Many of the World War II veterans have passed on. So our veteran population is getting younger that is being cared for by the VA, including women, which the VA never cared for before. So they have to transition from that geriatric type care to a younger preventative medicine type care, but still be able to care for the elderly. But now you're dealing with female and male younger veterans that have severe physical disabilities that they wouldn't otherwise have survived in earlier eras, and a lot more numerous psychological issues. So the complexity of care for those veterans has increased. Um, and now they also have to deal with the female veterans that are still capable of childbirth and caring for all those issues that they never had before.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole expanse of VA healthcare has just gotten bigger, which demands more money and more capabilities and more providers.
So was the VA originally set up basically for when people veterans got to their older ages, to take care of them? Because, like you said, it's younger people now, people coming out and they're in their 20s and they've got issues. I don't know how much the VA did that 40, 50 years ago, or dealt with people in their 20s coming out of the military.
The VA originally was chartered to take care of those individuals that were wounded in combat.
Okay.
Period.
All right.
Okay, when it was originally chartered. When you think about World War One and the advent of the Veterans Affairs that was developed really around World War II, it was to care for those that survived combat and came back home. So VA healthcare was somewhat limited. It was institutionalized. It was at the VA medical centers. Very few clinics were outside of the medical center. So if you were a veteran that lived in rural parts of the country, you had to travel to that medical center to get care, which meant veterans from up here had to go to Albany,
Right.
or had to go to White River Junction, or had to go to Syracuse. There wasn't any other options. Not until the 1980s did the vision start within the VA that we needed to provide that basic care out into the communities. And it really didn't flourish until after the 1990s, moving into 2000. Before that started to actually grow some legs and we saw some movement. I think the original clinic up here, the VA clinic, was in E-Town back in the, I want to say in the 90s, early 90s. And I know when I got out of the service in 94, they had a clinic here that was a VA clinic that was in the doctor offices at CVPH. So, and it has moved 3 or 4 times since then. But the clinic up here has always been a contract clinic, so it's a contractor providing a service for the VA.
It's not full time. It's
Right.
That's part of what they do, is provide
Yep.
this service for
Yep.
for the VA. So, is it if you're here and you're being treated and you've got an issue, and they've got a place somewhere else that specializes in that? Do they move you around, or are you going to be treated right here, or what's the situation on that?
Under the current law, there's been a big push by Congress to push the VA into caring for veterans where they live, community care. And over the years, the VA has been somewhat slow to move that direction, but part of that falls back on Congress, because Congress has to provide the funding and the regulations, the laws,
They gotta
to
demand
allow the VA to do this.
Right.
So many of the laws are now in place. The funding is still somewhat questionable, but the VA has the capability now to move out into the community, and we're starting to see that. So the VA does that in multiple different ways. One, they'll develop a clinic, which will be more of a like a super clinic. A good example of that is the VA clinic in Burlington or the VA clinic in Rome, New York. They have primary care, they have capability for physical therapy, they have eye appointments, they have podiatry appointments, they have audiology appointments that are come into that clinic, so the veteran doesn't have to go to the VA medical center. They go to that clinic and they can get that care done. X-rays are right there. So the capabilities are much greater. It's almost like a mini hospital. We would like to see the Plattsburgh clinic that way, but we still have some hurdles that we have to get through and get over first before we get there. And then the VA also is starting to work with community care contracts, where they're reaching out to healthcare providers in the community, like here in Plattsburgh, and trying to establish a contract with that community provider, whether it be CVPH or audiology or x-ray capability or a dentist, where veterans can ask for a referral to be seen locally, and if approved, then they're going to get their care locally, and the VA will cover the cost. So that's the way that the healthcare is moving. Sometimes not fast enough for the veterans that need it, but we're dealing with a government institution where things move slowly, and sometimes way too slow for the veteran.
Right.
I know I've been doing this job now for, this year is my 15th year, and there's some things that we had in discussion 15 years ago that haven't changed.
Still
You know?
talking about
There's other things that we complained about 15 years ago or talked about 15 years ago, and we've seen it transition to something different.
Were you a little surprised when you came in and found out that that's the way things worked?
I kind of expected that.
Did you?
Being in the military, being a government employee, nothing happens fast. And there's always a pause for time to make sure things are going to work the way they're supposed to work. But sometimes even after that pause, they don't work the way that you expect them to work. So.
Okay, just to be clear now, you said it was originally set up for things that happened in the military to take care of those problems. But now, if you're honorably discharged, you don't have to have served in a.
Yeah, it's right now for healthcare eligibility. You have to have a minimum of at least 2 years active service, continuous active service, to be eligible for VA healthcare, or be a wartime combat veteran who have served in one of those combat theaters, whether it be Vietnam, Iraq, or Afghanistan, or be currently fighting. Or be an individual that was discharged from the military due to service disabilities. And then there's certain eligibility that way.
Okay, so at that point, you're eligible. Does it cover any medical problems you have, or just certain ones?
Not always.
Not always.
It all depends on the individual. Everything is individual based. So if you take another individual that, say, retired from military service or got out of the military the same time I did, I'm a military retiree, and I have service-related disabilities that the VA treats me for. Because my disability rating is at least 50%, I am able to be seen for any condition Doesn't matter what it is.
So if you cut your finger sawing,
If I cut my finger
today-
sawing, I can go to the VA and they'll take care of me because I've got that 50% rating.
Right.
But you take the next individual that served 10 years in service, didn't enroll in VA healthcare immediately when they got out, and now they want to try to get in. If they don't have a service-related disability, they have to qualify an income. And their income,
low income.
yeah, they have to be a certain income level to be eligible for VA healthcare. And for a veteran and a spouse, their combined income could be no more than about $35,000 to be able to be eligible at the income level to get in through VA care. Sometimes that's prohibitive. You have to be almost at poverty to be able to be seen by the VA. So that becomes problematic for some veterans. And we will work with veterans that present that way and talk with them, find out what they did in service, and start reviewing some of their service records. And if they have an injury that is still plaguing them now, then that could be a service-related disability.
Your door into there.
So we file for a disability compensation. If we get that, then that can open the door for eligibility into health care as well. So there's multiple ways to get there, but it's not cut and dry. We have to look at each individual and their individual circumstances.
And it has to be assessed
Yes.
further up the ladder. So if I were in the military, did my 3 year term and just got out, I should go to the VA immediately? That's what you're saying?
You should at least be able to see if they will assess you and allow you care. Because if you've had at least 2 years of service and you go to the VA directly after active duty, you should be able to get in to be seen.
But that just gets your foot in the door.
That
gets you
just gets your foot
established.
in the door. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to do after that.
Well, of course, it's government.
Mhm.
You would expect that. So, do you have a guess on how many? You only take Clinton County veterans. If somebody from Chateauguay showed up here, what would you do?
I will not turn away a veteran that walks in the door in this office. Doesn't matter where they're from. I've talked with the county legislators. They prefer us to see county only.
Well, obviously.
We see probably 90 to 95% of our clients are from Clinton County. But we do see some clients from Franklin and Essex County. We have some clients from the Indian Nation up in Montreal. We've got some U.S. veterans that live in Montreal that we see. We've got some clients out of Vermont that have been referred to us that we see, and then we've developed a relationship over the years. We have clients that used to live here that have moved away, live in Florida or the Carolinas or out in Texas that we still work with. So you develop that relationship and that trust and that bond, it kind of stays with you. So it is what it is.
Yeah. Now,
You know,
now you mentioned Florida, and I know a lot of people summer up here and go to Florida, so they may have enrolled in the VA up here because they lived up here and still consider this at least half
Yep.
a year of their home. But they got an issue down in Florida or Arizona or whatever. They can go to the VA down there, and how does that work?
each VA has in itself, it's almost like its own little integrated system. The VA healthcare system nationwide is developed into VISN, which is VISN, which is a Veteran Integrated Network System. New York State is one visit. So you can be enrolled in Albany and use any VA healthcare facility within the state of New York, and they can find you. But if you go to Vermont or you go to Florida, they have to know at that facility where you've been seen before so they can find your records. You're in the system, but they just have to dig through additional screens to get there. They typically will have you enroll in their facility for that period of time that you're there. And then when you come back to New York, you have to re-enroll up here. Or you can elect to have all your primary care at your home location and just communicate between New York VA and Florida VA back and forth. It's paperwork. It's problematic. It shouldn't be that way. It should be fluid to no matter where you are in a country. If you need care, you can get it. And the VA hasn't got there yet. We've been barking up that tree for at least 15 years that I've been here, but we haven't got there yet.
After a few decades, you think?
Well, I think, the reality comes to us is that VA, like any other business, has people. And people have their own problems. They make their own mistakes. They want to guard and protect their own little territory and things like that. So you have to get through all that, filter through all that stuff to be able to actually get down to what is needed. And the only way that we can really address this is to be able to work through legislation. It's got to be done through Congress. But there needs to be a way that the VA can track me as a patient, whether I'm here in New York or I'm in Maryland or I'm in California or Texas, it doesn't matter.
You could be visiting a relative in Iowa
Yes.
and have issues, and all of a sudden
Yes.
the VA can't help you because you're a New Yorker.
Yeah.
That wouldn't make much sense.
No, it doesn't make sense. And that's the issues that we see. So we still have to attack those kind of issues. And the dialogue has been already started by different veterans organizations, veterans groups at the national level. And we'll see what happens in the future.
Well, I imagine you work closely with the VFW, with the American Legion, with the Vietnam groups, and so on.
Yeah.
You must constantly be in contact with these folks.
I deal with a lot of them. In fact, through the American Legion for the state of New York, here in the Department of New York, I am the chairman of the medical task force for the American Legion. We do, like national, we do site visits of all VA healthcare facilities within the state of New York, within the state boundaries. So I'm the chairman of that program, so we have approximately 25 American Legion members spread out throughout the state of New York that they work as teams to go in and do site visits at VA medical centers and VA clinics throughout the state. All those visit findings and reports come to me. I compile a final report, and that goes to our department commander. It goes to the national commander of the American Legion. We disseminate that out to our Congress representatives, our senators, and our local representatives as well, so they know what's going on. And we've seen some good things in the VA, but we've also seen some bad things. And we're not going there to wrap their knuckles, but we're going there to ensure that access is available for veterans to get the care that they need. and ensure that they have the staffing, the funding, and the means to care for the veterans and their needs when that arises. And many times we find that they are either short on staff or short on funding to be able to provide the type of care that is needed. So we raise those issues up to Congress, say this needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
And the way we do that is through legislative action. So, excuse me, my healthcare reports that we put together will lead us to resolutions that need to be written to either change or amend a certain law that deals with VA healthcare. And then we work through those resolutions to get them approved nationally, and then work through national level to make a legislative change to affect that amendment.
You know, I think there's few things sadder than when our system fails a veteran, and it happens to the old and to the young too. I can think of a fellow who was my distant cousin who ended up taking his own life, and just a few days before that he'd been in a VA facility and they released him, and in fact he had contacted me maybe a month before that saying he's going to be back in the area, and he wanted to know if he could talk to me on camera about issues and stuff, and I said, you know, yes, great, you know, let me know as soon as you get here.
Yeah.
And then to find out that he'd taken his own life, it's tragic. And you know, obviously there's some people you just can't help. They're just going to do that no matter what you do. But I think oft times we fail them.
Yeah, yeah. The system completely failed, you know, in those atmospheres, and we've seen that. You know, we've seen that just here within the last year and a half. Not here locally, but here in the state. We had a veteran, combat veteran, that had presented himself at a VA hospital emergency room down in New York City, and complaining of psychological issues, asking for help. And the individual that he talked to in the VA turned him away.
Wow.
And we assume, and we later found out, that he wasn't in their system, so they turned him away. He went back out to his vehicle, shot himself, committed suicide right there in the VA parking lot. The sad part of this is this was a year and a half ago. Under the Affordable Care Act, which has been in place now for 6-8 years.
Been a while, yeah.
It's against the law to turn anybody away from emergency room that is asking for care. That's a violation of the law.
Yeah, it should be.
Okay. So that's one instance where the VA healthcare, in its regulations and its laws and its training of staff, failed the veteran. And that's a great example of where sometimes people can be so callous that they can make the difference in someone either deciding to take their own life or not. So there's sometimes where there's a lot of training that has to occur, and reoccurring training has to be done to make sure everyone is fully aware of what the laws are and what the capabilities are and what they should be doing when they work for the VA or they work in any capacity where they're dealing with veterans.
If you're going to err in the sight of humanity. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah,
And sometimes we don't see that.
they just look at black and white. Nope, it says here that this. Nope, sorry, can't help you.
Yeah. We had another instance last year where there was a Korean War veteran that was in a VA hospital that had passed away. And his remains, his body, was placed on a gurney, moved out in the hallway to be supposedly taken to the morgue. But his remains sat there in that gurney, in that hallway, in that VA hospital for 3 days.
Wow. What can you say? What?
There's so many things that went wrong.
Yeah, I mean, where do you start?
Exactly. You got to start at the top. But that's inexcusable. And yet, it got brushed aside. We're not going to let that get brushed aside.
Oh no.
Because there's some people, in my view, that need to be fired. They didn't do their job. They didn't provide any respect to that veteran at all, or their family. And that's unacceptable in my eyes, and many veterans' eyes. And that's just not the way you treat
Anybody.
anybody,
Whether a
let
veteran or not.
alone a veteran or
Right.
not. In that same facility, I got word that there was a neurosurgeon that abruptly resigned, because of unwanted and misguided pressures from supervisors and management. So needless to say, our team is going into that facility here, I think, later this month, because there's some problems there. Those things have to be addressed. When you have that kind of an environment, people are going to make mistakes, and we have to understand and remember that this is an industry that requires people that need to be on point while they're at the job, and they're caring for other people that have problems. So they need to be on point and on the ball. And if they're not, then they either need to be retrained or moved to a different department or removed from the job completely.
Yeah.
And if that means a manager, so be it.
Yeah,
You know, I expect the same for me. If I don't do my job, I expect that somebody's going to come in and say,
Yeah.
you either fix it or you're gone.
Yeah.
And
Accountability.
that's exactly what it is, you know, and I expect that out of myself, and I expect that out of every employee in the VA. They're providing that care for those veterans that provided so much for this country.
Now, you told me about the people who've been in and hadn't come to the VA, and then now they had to be income qualified.
Mm-hmm.
When I was here a couple of days ago, you talked to me about some, what's it called, Blue Water
Navy veterans, yes.
So this is a new thing that people who might think they aren't eligible should become aware of, correct?
It's a new thing, old thing. It's been hashed around for many years. This dates back to the Vietnam War, Vietnam veterans. Our warfighting veterans that served in Vietnam were exposed to Agent Orange. Agent Orange was a chemical mixture, a defoliant, that was used to kill the plant life, to thin out the jungle for our troops when they served in Vietnam so they could see what they were dealing with. The jungles over in Vietnam were so thick that you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. And it was used typically to clear an area for a base or a fighting position, and it was sprayed widely throughout Vietnam and many other parts of the world as well. And in the 1980s, Vietnam veterans started taking the VA to court over disabilities that they were experiencing that was common to many of them that served in Vietnam. And in 1990, the Vietnam Agent Orange laws started to become and start being put in place. But the laws excluded Navy veterans that served out in the ocean, in the territorial waters. The Agent Orange law of 1990, I think 1990 or 1997, established the requirement that you had to have boots on ground in Vietnam to be presumed that you were exposed to Agent Orange. So if you fought in Vietnam or you served in Vietnam and you could prove that you were in country, then you were presumed to have been exposed to Agent Orange. And all the chemical mixture that was there, which means any of those medical conditions that were related to that, if you were diagnosed with that, that would be a presumptive for service connection to get a service-connected disability. Navy troops, Marines that served in the rivers of Vietnam were included in that presumption. That was the inland waterways. But the blue water, the deep waters, were excluded. And just recently, I'm going to jump off camera for a minute because I want to pull a paper here.
We are talking with Steve Bowman, the Veterans Director here at Clinton County, and we're in downtown Plattsburgh on this Valentine's Day. I didn't wish you a happy Valentine's Day,
Yes.
Steve, 2019.
Yeah, it is Valentine's Day. But yeah, it was the VA held since 1997 that blue water veterans, those who served aboard ships off the coast of Vietnam, were not eligible for Agent Orange presumptive disabling conditions, which applied to all veterans who served boots on ground.
Or in the brown water.
Yep. Or who served in the inland waterways of Vietnam. There was a U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit issued a resounding decision in favor of Blue Water Navy veterans here just recently. This case was the Procopio versus Wilkie case, where the Federal Circuit ruled in a 9-2 margin that VA's interpretation of the law was indefensible, which means that how they interpreted it was in their favor and not necessarily
Right.
the veterans' favor. And that the Blue Water Navy veterans are, in fact, entitled to the same legal presumptions concerning Agent Orange exposure that all other veterans who served in Vietnam during the Vietnam War receive. So this decision orders the VA to stop interpreting the Agent Orange presumptive condition law in a manner that both the text of the law and the congressional intent behind the law does not support. In fact, Judge Kimberly Moore wrote for the Circuit Court, the government's foot on land requirement, first articulated in 1997, does not provide a basis to find ambiguity in the language Congress chose. What does that mean for all of these Navy veterans that served in those ships? It means that there's a window of opportunity right now for them to file claims for any of the presumptive conditions that they may have in relationship to Agent Orange. So what kind of conditions are we talking about? One of the most common ones is diabetes type 2. Another one is prostate cancer, lung cancer, multiple myeloma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, Parkinson's disease, B-cell leukemia, ischemic heart disease are many of the common type disabilities that our Vietnam veterans are dealing with that were exposed to Agent Orange. So what I urge any veteran or even the widow of a veteran that served in this capacity, reach out to our office, get in touch with us, and we'll review the case, and if it warrants, we'll get a claim initiated. We have a window of opportunity right now to do this. If we wait and the VA appeals this case, that window could shut.
Yeah.
So the opportunity is now to do it.
You know, I just find it strange that the VA would appeal this so that they wouldn't have to treat veterans. It just, some things just boggle your mind, and this is kind of a, you would think that the VA would be leaning in the other direction, and you don't have to comment if you don't want, leaning in the other direction, again, erring on the side of helping the veterans rather than erring on the side of denying them coverage. That's my personal thought. You don't have to.
It's
You don't have
all
to
about
respond.
money. It's all about money and appropriations.
So if they're spending it on them, they haven't got to spend on something else.
Well, it's when you look at the VA budget prior to 2000, the VA was part of the Department of Defense budget. They didn't have their own separate budget. Now they have their own separate budget. But the VA compensation benefits has exploded tenfold in the last 20 years. VA healthcare has exploded in the last 10 to 20 years. But what is the promise of the VA? Why was VA established? To care for those veterans who have given so much for this country and our Constitution. That means all veterans, not just cherry picking which veterans you want to care for. If they've served, doesn't matter what year, what era, and they gave their all, and they serve, especially those that served in combat, the VA has a responsibility to care for them, both in the medical side and in the benefits, education, all the things that the VA can do. They have that responsibility to do that. And it's currently not happening. There's too many laws that were established that are very restrictive and very troubling when you go through and read them. I support this Federal Circuit Court ruling, but the possibility exists that the VA could appeal this and win. So right now,
future
before
applicants
that,
could be denied, or they could.
it could be gone.
Yeah.
For a capability.
Could
So
get in
right
there now.
now, that capability exists. That window of opportunity exists for us to be able to file a claim and potentially win it. And you don't know unless you're going to file.
Right. So
So,
now is the time to move, not just while the iron is hot, while there's still an iron there to.
exactly, while the window is open,
Yeah,
before they slam it shut on us.
yeah. Hopefully
And
they won't.
they could appeal it, and the Supreme Court could deny their appeal.
Right. Yeah.
Which then the law is the law. So
Right.
we'll see. We don't know which way the Supreme Court will go, and we
So-
don't know what the VA is going to do.
So this is basically Navy personnel, or would there be others?
It could be Navy, it could be Marines as well.
Marines, wondering
So
about
anybody that would have been aboard a U.S. Navy ship within the territorial waters of Vietnam, that maybe has tried in the past or have never tried to file a claim for disability, the opportunity is right now.
So don't.
So don't delay.
Yeah, spread the word. Tell people you know about this, because if it happens that they close that door, it'd be unfortunate that these people can't get the
Exactly.
benefits that they've earned.
Yeah. And I've already reached out to a couple veterans that I know that fit in that realm to get in here so we can start doing some paperwork and get things started.
So have you've spread this word, I assume, to all the veterans groups, the Legion, the
Yep.
VFW, and
Yep.
the Vietnam, particularly the Vietnam veterans groups.
Yep.
Now, just off topic a little bit, but haven't some names, because of this Agent Orange, been added to the Vietnam Wall? It seems to me that I've heard that some people who have died from Agent Orange
That can be
Related.
petitioned.
have been added to
yeah.
the list of.
There is a way to
Casualties.
do that, but you have to go online and find that avenue. There is a way for that to be done for those Vietnam veterans that have died from wounds from Vietnam
Or
or
Agent
from
Orange.
exposure, can be added to that wall. I don't know what the full parameters are, but there is a capability out there where you can communicate with that group, and I think it's Vietnam Veterans of America that oversee that. So, but there is a way that can be done.
Yeah, it's a little off topic here, but it just something
Yeah.
that came to my mind while we were talking.
Yeah.
Okay, how many people in your office here, Steve? What's kind
We
of staff
have
do you
a staff that works directly for me. There's 4. I have another veterans counselor who's Kevin LaBeouf out of here, and he lives out in Schuyler Falls area. Kelly Frenier, who is our veteran service aide, she lives up in Dannemora. And then Marissa Romeo, who is a part-time administrative clerk for us. She lives in Saranac. We're all either veterans or have a veteran in our family. We also provide space for Tracy Reese from the New York State Division of Veterans Affairs. So we work together with the division, which is a state agency, but our veteran population is of such that they felt that they need a full-time staff member up here as well. So, and we do a lot of the same things, but we partner together on other things as well. So it works out quite well.
Now, in the last year or two, you had a long-time employee here that people were probably familiar with seeing when they walked in, from Moores that retired.
Yeah, Linda DeCoste, Linda Supernaw, both were here when I came to work in 2004. They retired 2005, 2006 time frame.
That long ago.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
So they're older than I thought
Oh,
they
yeah.
were.
Yeah. Yeah. They're still older than me, because I was a young kid when I came in here compared to everybody else. So, yeah. But yeah, they had been longtime employees in this office. Had both of them had worked for the county. Linda DeCoste was, I think, around 30 plus years. Linda Supernaw had like 26 or some years when she decided to retire. But yeah, they were here, and I thank them very much for training me and teaching me and guiding me my first year or so that I was here, getting me going in the right direction.
Yeah, you've got a
Yeah.
on the job training is what it is. You come in
Essentially
here.
is,
Yeah.
yes. And you know, I've taken the ball and run with it. So.
Okay. Anything else, Steve, that we should talk about that you're gonna think of half a day from now and say, oh heck, we should have.
Now, I think the big thing is that, you know, if a family member or a veteran themselves have a question about anything dealing with the VA or their military service, they should call us.
Yeah.
They should reach out to us. We're here. We're almost every day. We've got somebody in the office. I may not always be here. Wear a lot of different hats, so I'm all over the place sometimes.
You might be in Washington hobnobbing with the.
Well, I don't hobnob a whole lot, but I do travel quite a bit. So, but I would just recommend that if people have questions or concerns, to call the office, and we will find an answer for you. And if we don't know it right up the front, we'll investigate it and get back with them. But our phone number is 518-565-4720. And that's the Clinton County Veteran Service Agency. We're easy to reach.
Okay. All right. Wrap it up then.
I think so.
All right. We've been talking with Steve Bowman. Say it one more time.
The director of the Clinton County Veteran Service Agency.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.